There we go. So this call is being recorded. We will be sharing the recording later, so you can share with anybody that was unable to make it tonight. At least in Southern Ontario at the window, the smoke has kind of lifted a little bit. And so maybe some folks are climbing because it's a beautiful night. Okay, so first of all, thanks for being here. I know some folks, I see some familiar names. My name's Dustin. I'm a volunteer with the OAC. I have been volunteering with the OAC for a number of years now. I've actually lost track. I'm going to share with you a presentation. My goal is to take about 35 minutes or so to share this out. And then at the end, we're going to open up the floor. We're going to use the chat to do a Q&A. Apologies that we can't have everyone just jump in and come on video and talk. Again, I'm not super familiar with the functionality, but please do use that chat for Q&A. And I will do my absolute best to answer your questions, as well as other panelists and members from the OAC here. Okay, let's get going. So there's a few things we're going to talk about tonight. The first thing I'm going to mention is just the general situation, what's happened recently and why we're here tonight. There's obviously new developments with Rockwood. I will touch on that. I know that was mentioned earlier. We're going to talk about the OAC's plan and what we're doing to take action, and then what you can do. And we have some very specific asks. We need your help. And then we'll do that Q&A. All right, so let's go. All right, so as you are all likely aware, climbing is an incredibly rapidly growing sport everywhere across the globe, but especially in Ontario. You can see here that, since 2018, the number of climbing gyms in Southern Ontario alone has grown by 42%. That is wild. The data that we have here, about 47 gyms within Ontario, is actually now old. There's more than 52, even though we only got this data about a month ago. It just shows you how quickly things are changing. Climbing's been happening in Ontario for well over 100 years. The oldest gym, Joe Rockheads, has been around since the 1990s and still business today. In fact, it's grown. Climbing is booming and there are more and more climbers every single day. The sport is in the Olympics. The kids comp and youth scene is impressively large and filling a pipeline of athletes all vying to be part of that next Canadian Olympic dream. And Ontario has by far the most athletes in every age category and discipline Canada-wide. A quick stat that I heard just that kind of like articulates a little bit of this, and I have not verified this myself, but I heard recently that MEC on Queen Street in Toronto sells more climbing shoes than any bricks and mortar location in North America. Climbing is getting big. There are thousands and thousands of climbers across the province. We tried to get an estimation of that number and we just can't. Like we just can't. Despite this, there's no provincial policy that fosters climbing. In fact, quite the opposite. There's policy that discriminates against climbing, which does not make sense at all. In other places across the country, climbing is welcomed, it's promoted, it's successfully managed. It's seen both at the federal level and as well as in provinces and territories as an asset. Everywhere from BC to Quebec to Nova Scotia to Nunavut has more progressive climbing policy than Ontario. This is obviously the same with the US and the EU. These places also have large populations. These places also have sensitive environments and concerned citizens, but they still are able to implement sensible, well-managed practices that result in win-win situations where climbing opportunity is realized and appreciated. The result of Ontario is that a number of climbers have so far in our province recreated outdoors seemingly under the radar, sneaking around in order to try to climb, or they're just getting up and moving out of the province. I think last year Squamish saw a 20% growth rate, and I think at least half of those people were climbers from Ontario. I mean, I'm being facetious, obviously, but I think you've been in Ontario long enough, you know that Canmore and Squamish both have a lot of Ontarians, maybe more Ontarians than Albertans or BCers. All this is to say that this is a provincial issue. This is province-wide. From Devil's Glen to Sleeping Giant, Killarney to Lion's Head, and ever in between, this affects all of us. I have spoken to people from across the province. This is an issue. And it's seemingly getting worse. Obviously, the news of Rockwood came as an utter shock and disappointment. And I encourage you all, anybody who cares about Rockwood, please take action. Please email these people. I know these memes have been circulating on social media. Do it. Send them an email. Tell them how you feel. Be polite, be courteous, be respectful, but tell them how you feel. Tell them how important climbing is at Rockwood. You know, Pamela, Samantha, Chris, Stephen. In their day-to-day, they generally don't really think about rock climbing. Get them to think about it. It's important. But like I said, it's a provincial issue. It goes beyond Rockwood. It goes beyond any one location. But don't move to Squamish just yet. There is some, thank you for the note. Yes, I did change slides. I have it open twice and I'm only looking at one of them, so I apologize, but thank you for the note. So federal provinces are good. EU, US is good for promoting climbing. Ontario's behind the times. Climbers are leaving the province for better opportunities. Here's a bunch of web pages from other provinces that show that this is like well loved. This is a provincial issue. Like I said, from Devil's Glen to Sleeping Giant, Killarney to Lion's Head, and ever in between. This is not just one location. And of course, Rockwood. Incredibly disappointing. Email these people. Please go email these people and let them know how much Rockwood matters to you. But I'm going to keep going for the sake of time. And this will be recorded, so you can obviously see this presentation afterwards. And I'd be happy to share the presentation as well, or any of the references herein. But don't just get up and leave Ontario just yet. So there is some recognition and appreciation for climbing in this province. Interestingly enough, it's not the provincial government that's picked up rock climbing, it's actually the smaller entities. So conservation areas. Halton's a great example. Grey Sauble, Conservation Sudbury. These places have welcomed and promoted rock climbing and have been doing it for years. Municipalities, Northern Bruce, Lion's Head. Lion's Head itself has a sign in downtown's Lion's Head that promotes rock climbing, interestingly enough. The town of Milton, the city of Burlington, the city of Thunder Bay, the municipality of Grey Highlands. These are all places that have accepted and are promoting rock climbing. Even private landowners have more progressive policy around rock climbing than our provincial government. The Turtle near Milton, the Crags near Thunder Bay. These are privately owned, but still allow rock climbing. You know, municipalities love to put the pictures of rock climbers on their leaflets and their pamphlets and their tourist information. Why can't we do that at a provincial level? We're taking these examples, all these examples that we have, and we're writing them up right now. We're building case studies. We're going to send those to our provincial leaders. We need them to know that there are frameworks in place to have well-managed, accepted rock climbing. There's frameworks in place to deal with liability, and there's frameworks in place to deal with safety, a lot of the concerns that these people bring up. We want to show that Ontario has already in place great examples of embracing and benefiting from rock climbing. It's time to get more, though. It's time really to let the provincial government know the amazing opportunities that rock climbing can provide for all Ontarians, not just us who want to recreate. So let's talk about the benefits of climbing. These are the big three: economic opportunity, recreational opportunity, and conservation opportunity. Rock climbing hits all three, and all three are mandates by our provincial government. So rock climbing should align to our provincial government mandate, and it does. Oh man, I keep forgetting about those slides. Sorry, folks. Got to do two things at once. Okay, so the big three. Let's start with economic opportunity. So we sent out a survey, and we very much so appreciated the next slide. I appreciate the notes and the comments. The response we got over 1,600 responses in 1 week, which was pretty incredible. And what it did is it painted a bit of a picture for us, and we're using that data and we're going to send it to the politicians as well. 89% of Ontarians say that climbing access is important to consider when booking travel plans. 62% of Ontario climbers have considered moving out of the province due to climbing's poor access here. 91% of climbers over the past year have gone to bars or restaurants in local climbing areas. They've checked out shops at 87%, bought groceries at 86%, and stayed overnight, either camping or accommodation. Climbing is an economic force in Ontario. But wait, there's more. 63% of Ontario climbers access the outdoor rock or ice. Climbing has factored into where they've decided to rent or purchase their property. 34% say the location of where they purchased their property or residence was influenced by outdoor climbing access. And approximately 16% of climbers' disposable income is spent on climbing, which is a wild stat. Additionally, not to mention, the festivals that we run in this province bring economic activity to local communities and boost tourism. That includes the Beaver Valley Climbing Fest that's happened in the past, and unfortunately it's been put on hold due to COVID. We're trying to get that going again. And then, of course, the Southern Ontario Climbing Fest in Maynooth, which does some awesome work. And not to mention all of the periphery businesses and activities that are related to rock climbing directly or indirectly. And that includes climbing gyms, camps, recreational centers, university walls, guiding companies, guidebook publishing, TV and film rigging, rope access companies, gear equipment. The picture that I have on this page is on rope environmental assessment, wilderness, first aid, outdoor education, military, SWAT, tactical training. And don't forget about all the climbing shoes at MEC. Climbing it's real. All right, now let's talk about the evidence for recreational opportunity. Honestly, it's flat out overwhelming. There's like hands down so much research out there on the benefits that climbing brings for both mental health and physical health. You can just Google it yourself, just start going down the rabbit hole. I'm not going to get any specifics. I do want to pull out one that was my personal favorite, which is the effect of on-site lead on the psychology and physiology responses to rock climbing. So, on-site lead, it's good for you. Think about that. All right, now let's talk about everyone's favorite, conservation. The research is really clear on this. Blanket bans do not work and have been shown to make matters worse, especially in areas where recreational activities are already taking place. Rather, collaboration, engagement, and education with stakeholder groups is best practice and leads to optimal compliance. If you are looking to take care of the environment, it's best to work with people, not against them. Studies that use a nuanced and specific methodology versus broad blanket bans show that climbers prefer sites without vegetation. There are studies that have been done here in Ontario that show that. Collaboration and education result in compliance and is recommended for the course of action specifically for the Niagara Escarpment. Otherwise, it has been noted to be detrimental. These have been published scientific studies by universities both in our province and outside of our province and show that realistically, we're kind of getting it backwards right now. Conservation and outdoor recreation are not at odds with each other. Recreational management cultivates conservation. Mike, I see you raised your hand.
Sorry, I'm trying to get you in between slides here. I think we still have an issue with the chat, and I think there's that not everyone can participate in the chat. If you on your side have an option to allow folks to make comments to everyone, that would be great. I know personally here I can only make comments or in the chat to hosts and panelists.
Okay, Pat, any ideas of how I can do that?
Oh,
The same area that you said allowed attendees to chat with everybody, there is a separate setting that allows panelists to chat with everyone.
Okay.
Yeah, attendees are fine. It's just the panelists, we can't message you guys. We can only chat amongst ourselves right now.
And where would I do that? Sorry.
You had it in the webinar controls toolbar with chat. There should be like a more or three dots.
Got it. Yes. How about now?
Yes. Thank you. Sorry.
Thanks.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Apologies. Like I said, Zoom newbie over here.
You're doing great.
All right. Okay, great. Where was I? Okay, so yes, conservation and outdoor recreation are not at odds. Recreational management cultivates conservation, and that's been shown in the research. And yet, we seem to be getting it backwards. So this is a sign that was posted at DG at the beginning of May that has resulted in the closure of the climbing on the Ontario Park managed portion of Devil's Glen. And, you know, this, which happened last month, combined with Rockwood, it's enough. Like, it's enough. It's time for change in Ontario. It's time for Ontario to recognize that climbing is an opportunity, and the province, Ontarians across the province are missing out on that opportunity. So we, all climbers, we want to work together with Ontario Parks and the Ministry of Environment, Parks and Conservation to realize the opportunity for rock climbing in our provincial parks. So we want to find a way to allow Ontarians to rock climb in our provincial parks, boosting tourism, expanding recreational opportunities, and ecological conservation. The data points to all three. All three are things that the parks and the ministry want to do as well. So we are aligned. So how are we going to do that? That's the big question. So our plan is simple. We have a goal. Our goal is to have rock climbing as a legal, safe, accessible, and recognized activity at provincial parks. What does this mean? Legal means that it's allowed by the ministry and it's supported by specific policy. Safe means that there's a climbing management plan in place that allows for the management of that climbing activity. Accessible means that it's supported by Ontario Parks with infrastructure, and that it's recognized by Ontario Parks, the township, and the county. How are we going to get our goal accomplished? Okay, so we have a four-phased approach. In the last few weeks, you may have noticed that we have been a little more active on social media, keeping you informed, letting you know what's happening, sharing information. This is phase one, where we're priming the community. We're trying to share the message, we're trying to raise awareness, we're getting in contact with media, we're trying to make sure that the word is getting out about the state of climbing in Ontario and in the parks. Then we're going on to phase two. That's where we're headed right now, and that's where we need your help. We're going to do a letter writing campaign. But the letter writing campaign is not like the survey where it's going to last 1 week. We need the letter writing campaign to last months. So between now and the end of the summer, we basically need your help to get as many letters as possible. We've been talking to a professional lobbyist who has helped guide us in some of these things. And our goal is to get over 3,000 letters. That means that there's 78 people on this call. That means that each person on this call needs to go out and muster up hundreds of letters. Someone can do the quick math on that one. And then finally, once we assess in phase four, we could then possibly do a second push. I'm going to go into a little more detail on each one just very quickly. So, as I mentioned, we're here. This is where we are right now. We're bringing a solid case to politicians through our letters and showing how the benefits of rock climbing can improve Ontarians. And we have a fair and very reasonable ask, which is to be recognized and create a management plan for climbing in Ontario. We've already had some conversations with politicians. We have a good working relationship so far. We need letters to help bolster and create the foundation to push that forward even faster. So as you know, we've been promoting this as wide as we can, but the OAC social media on Facebook and Instagram only goes so far. So we need your help there too. We need you to tell your friends, we need you to tell your family, we need you to spread the word. Basically, anybody that cares about climbing in any way, whether they do it themselves, whether they know how much you love it, that's a person that benefits from climbing in this province. And they should care that it can happen. So it's time to let that voice be heard. And it's really time to make sure that we start writing letters and getting people to write letters too. You need to be, as best as you possibly can, the best advocate for climbing that you can be. How are you going to do this? Well, we're going to try to make it as easy as possible for you. We're starting a website called climbinparks.ca. I mean, we iterated on that name a lot, but this is the one that it is, so we're going with it. climbinparks.ca, where we will provide a widget on that website that has a preloaded letter where you just put in your information, your location, and it will send that letter from your email account to certain people. We'll get to the people in just a second. That widget is going to be live, ideally this weekend. We will inform you when it goes live. But please do share that website with everyone you know, your friends, your family. Take your laptop, take your iPad to the gym, get people to sign up and shoot letters out as you're climbing in between burns. You can sign up right now on that site or through the OAC account to know when it's live from us. But of course, we will be promoting that on our social media. And as I mentioned, our goal is over 3,000 letters. Our lobbyist friend says that politicians don't get out of bed for a couple hundred. You know, if you reach into the 5 digits, you can get change very, very quickly. And we think that 3,000 or more will definitely resonate and get us the meetings and the attention that we need to get change. What's this letter going to say? We currently have our draft. It's almost done. But basically, the letter in a nutshell says, climbing is important to me, my community, and my life. We'll have some quick stats on climbing to inform folks that it's happening in a safe, manageable way across the province already. And fundamentally, the ask is, I want the Ministry of Environment, Parks and Conservation to work in collaboration with the OAC to deliver provincial climbing management plans. Thank you. And then a number of niceties, you know, like, awesome. So who are we targeting? Really straightforward. We are targeting David Piccini, Honorable David Piccini. He is currently the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks. And sorry, Parks and Conservation, that should be switched. And then your local MPP. So one thing that's important for the provincial government to know is that this is a provincial matter. So where you live and that MPP is important for them to know. The widget on the site will be able to have that ability to know from your address which MPP is yours and be able to automatically send that to your MPP, even if you do not know who your MPP is. So we'll provide email addresses. We'll provide that letter template. We'll provide pre-filled, easy, ready to go via, that's an old website address, not ontarioclimbs.ca, but the new one, Climb in Parks at the bottom. What we need you to do is become the strongest advocate for climbing that you can be. We need you to send a letter, and then we need you to get your friends and your loved ones to also send a letter. And of course, if you'd prefer, a brief personalized letter goes a long way. You don't need to use the templated letter that we will provide you. If you love to write, also, feel free to send snail mail. That's great. They will definitely get it, and they will definitely read it. All right, some really quick FAQs just before we get towards the Q&A. Do I need to be in the province to write a letter? No, you do not. You can be in BC, you can be American, you don't need to be from Ontario. You may have friends that climb here, you may have friends that have moved out of the province, you may know some people that are really passionate about climbing and think that it should happen here because maybe they want to come here in the future. That's okay. They can write too. Do you need to climb outside? Absolutely not. This, as I mentioned, is a province-wide issue, and it goes right to the heart of climbing across the province. That includes indoor and outdoor. Should I write if I want to have climb outside one day? Yes, absolutely. My brother's uncle's nephew's cousin rock climbed once and I care for them. Maybe I should write a letter. Yes, write a letter. I think you get the point here. I don't have access issues near me, but maybe one day I will, and I want to show the government that climbing matters. Yes, absolutely, write a letter. Access issues definitely impact certain locations now, but there's no reason why they might not impact other locations in the future. And the other thing is that, think about the future generations of climbers that want to be able to climb in this province. We want to be able to open up this province to climbing in a positive way that allows everyone to realize the opportunities. So this is our opportunity to try to change that now. Just some fun types of climbers that, can write letters. And I'll go through the list quickly. Weekend warriors, dirtbags, gym rats, comp kids, Northern Ontario backcountry badasses, YouTube tutorial champs, trad dads, sport monkeys, limestone cowboys, girls, crackheads, adventure photographers, a friend of a friend, bushwhacking developers, the Sioux crew, pebble wrestlers, kid crushers, ice demons, the I moved to Squam because Ontario sucks, I moved to Canmore because Ontario sucks, old school crushers, aspiring alpinists, rope guns, plastic pullers, lion's head boaters, anybody can write a letter. I think you get the point. Let's work together to make sure that this guy, who is a climber and is still developing, has an opportunity to enjoy nature for many years to come. All right, I said it was going to take about half an hour, 7:31, perfect. I would love to open the floor to some conversation. I realize we can't do that openly, but please do use the question function, and I'd be very happy to try to answer the questions as best as I can. And other panelists, I feel free also to jump in or ask questions that maybe I'm missing, because I see a couple of chats, but I don't see everything. I think Brendan Bars asked a question. If the rock climbing is being closed due to microhabitats, would data help by showing the overall rock that is above ground throughout the province versus how much rock climbers use? Undoubtedly, it would be 0.01%. Thus, why is this such an issue? Brendan, I agree. I absolutely agree. So in the specific example of the Devil's Glen closures, we have requested the survey data that has led to the closures. We have yet to receive that information. We do have scientific papers that have been published that show that climbers prefer blank walls, not walls with vegetation, and that it can be managed successfully if done properly. So it's a great point that you make, and we're going to continue to try to make sure that we can tackle those specific issues instead of, I think what has been done so far is using blanket bans as a pretty blunt tool. Hopefully that answers your question. If it doesn't, please write again. Long Trong writes, there's an increasing number of new gym climbers every single day who are completely unaware to the outdoor issues. Any plans on how to better raise awareness amongst that user group so that they are educated by the time they are ready to be introduced to outdoor climbing? Yes, it's a great point. I see Casey is also typing an answer, which is great. So one thing that we can definitely do that OAC members I know here plan to do throughout the summer, and I would ask all of you to do as well, is in your gyms, share this information, tell people, have talks, get people to sign letters and as best you can, share what we have shared today. I think you're right. There's a ton of new climbers out there. It's up to all of us to try to help people understand how to recreate outdoors in the best way possible. Of course, we try to do that through our social media, through education, but I do believe it's on all of us to do that. I would also say it's also upon the places that allow climbing to try to help educate climbers on the uses of those places. So my hope is that with a proper management plan in place with parks, Education would definitely be a cornerstone of that, but no promises. We are, we're going to work on that. Liz, what about getting local businesses involved? Yes, absolutely. Liz, you may have noticed on our plan slide, I have what we call as an activation funnel. The goal here is to start with the core community and build from there. Most of the members on this call, I would assume, are part of that core community. You pay attention to our messaging. You've donated your time tonight to show up for this call. So I think now we need to expand beyond that core community of passionate individuals and start to educate those around us. And that includes reaching out to businesses and trying to get them on board. Amazingly, in the wake of the last few weeks with the DG and Rockwood, we've already had some gym owners independently reach out to us unprompted and offer very generous support. We absolutely plan to make use of that and leverage that for expanding like where we can get support from other businesses as well. Hopefully that answers your question, Liz. Jesse or Jess, what is going on with the access issues in Bancroft? Jess or Jesse, apologies, I'm not sure. Great question. I think Randy, if you don't mind taking that one, I know you're heading up Bancroft.
So I did have a conversation with a local in Bancroft, and it actually turns out that we do have an in with a local resident who his family has been in Bancroft for like 100 years. In small towns like this, time like that matters. This individual used to sit on city council. They were head of the fire department. So they seem to have contacts with everybody. So we will sit down with them and see if we can make some connections and see where we can go. But the reality is in this case, it's private landowners that have the concerns regarding access. The city itself is open to climbing. So this is a bit more of a challenging situation, but we'll see what can happen. We'll have those conversations and we'll update appropriately as time comes.
Yeah, so we're working on it, Jesse. I realize there's also a lot of questions in the general chat that I am missing, and I apologize for that. So I will try to get those too. Other panelists, if you don't mind, also letting me know if I'm missing anything. Of course, I see Mike, thank you so much. Definitely appreciate the support. And again, I think, we'll definitely take support in any way. One of the best ways to support for change is also, writing letters and getting everyone that we know to write letters too. It really accelerates things with the politicians, as we've been told by our lobbyist friend. Sabrina asks, how do gym owners demonstrate the importance of climbing access in their gyms? That's a great point, Sabrina. Obviously, each gym owner, it's up to them. But like I mentioned before, we have had some folks reach out. We are going to be reaching out to all the gyms eventually and specifically asking them to help us out on this. But we are definitely wanting to apply and use the gyms as best as we can to reach more people. Liz, that's great. Ecology consultant specifically in climbing areas. That's amazing. He might be willing to help. Yes, Liz, please. If you don't mind, maybe putting me and your friend in touch, that'd be amazing. We will definitely need to answer questions around ecology, so that would be helpful. Jeff asks, specific to Devil's Glen, what has happened to the issues from past couple of years? Filling of gullies with dead fell without local support, restoring access will be a problem. Jeff, the gully is clean. I will say that it is. I was there Monday. I walked through it. It's still, I think, one of the best ways to access the crag in Ontario. But so just to be clear, the Devil's Glen climbing property, half of that property is managed by the Ministry of Environment, Parks and Conservation, which is the overbody for Ontario Parks, and half of that property is managed by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. The Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry side of that property is still open to climbing. You can still climb there. The side that the Ontario Parks manages is where the signs have gone up that have notified closed climbing. We have been in conversations with Ontario Parks. I would say, and kudos to some of the members and panelists on this team that have done a great job at maintaining that relationship as we've gone through this. I would say those conversations are going well. I hope soon that we can report, positive progress on that. But out of respect to those conversations not having any finality yet, we're just not ready to kind of share specific information on that. But I will say the gully is clear of sticks. What about access to cow? Yeah, good question. So I don't know specifically too much about cow. I'm not sure if any of the panelists can speak to that one themselves, but my understanding is that cow is on private property, and that private property landowner has requested no climbing. That's sometimes the way it unfortunately happens, that we have to respect private landowners' wishes if that's the case. Is there, do any of the panelists have any more specific information on Cow Crag?
I know Jessica has maybe some additional details over and above what I have, but from what I understand through our investigations, as well as our legal expertise that we have sought, there is a dispute as to who owns the cliff itself. That said, the portion under the cliff where there was once a climber trail is definitely private property. And so there is some confusion as to how to access that area, both for climbers and hikers. And there is a farmer below that does own that portion of land below the cliff definitively, that has expressed that he also owns the easeway that hikers and climbers have used. And we can definitively say that he does not own the easeway, that it is legal to use that easeway as a recreationalist. But in terms of the actual ownership of the cliff, we have a very unsatisfying answer in saying that it's not legally settled. Do you have anything else to add to that, Jessica?
No, that's pretty much the same. Like, I haven't had any further contact with him except for when Dustin and I went together to talk with him. We're kind of at a standpoint with that. No further updates. But as it is, like, as far as we know, it is his property to get there and to stand at the base of it. And he does not want climbers there. So.
Thank you.
Sabrina asked us a question: what would support from gym owners look like to the OAC? Great question, Sabrina. We are still formulating our complete approach for how we're going to approach gym owners. Off like my cuff, ideally it'd be great to get a night where an OAC member, or maybe one of the gym one of the gym attendees or folks what's it called, person who goes there a lot, who has the voice of climbers in that area, could give a little bit of a talk like this or related, and do walk around with a laptop and get people to send emails. That would be a great set of support. Also, if the gyms have any newsletters or social media to kind of spread our message, would be also incredibly helpful. Hopefully that helps answer that question. I'll add one more that I just thought about. As business owners, writing the ministry and sharing their own views on why climbing is important to them, I think would also be very helpful. It's important for the ministry and for the provincial government to know that this is an economic force in our province. It's not nothing. Janie, is there a land survey that shows the land ownership separation. Oh, it disappeared. I think maybe that question was answered by Mike, maybe, hopefully. Not a question, but an aside. A fellow climber was just kicked out of the parking lot of X and Y on 6th line by the owner and member of Halton Conservation. Okay, that is good to note. We'll have someone follow up on that, I think. Whoever's running Halton Conservation. Sabrina asks, it'd be great if the gym owners made those letters public on their websites. I absolutely agree. That'd be great. Again, I think it's important for, gym owners, as owners of facilities where there's many climbers aggregating, they have a position of influence in our communities. And, they can get as involved or as not involved as they want. But I agree, that would be incredibly helpful for gym owners to be able to publicly say how important climbing is. I think I would think that would be important for people. Janie, would it be helpful when people sign the letters to add their profession below their names? I actually don't know. Maybe. I can ask our lobbyist friend to see what his position is on that. In what I know for a fact, what he did say was important was to show that this is a province-wide issue, which I wholeheartedly believe that it is. As well, he said that it was important to get a lot, which is perhaps not too surprising. So I will ask about the professions. I'm not sure if that carries lesser or more weight. I think right now, just as we have a conservative government in power, and based on, I think, things that I've heard from Doug Ford, he's changed the slogan of Ontario to "We're open for business." I think this government is highly motivated by economic arguments. So I think perhaps, there's an angle there that that certain professions and businesses being a part of this conversation and showing how important climbing is would be a good thing. Hopefully that helps. We've got that one. Trina, are you able to share a little bit more information about the case studies that you mentioned the OAC's got underway? Example, particular locations of focus. Yes, absolutely. So, so the case studies came as a request from the ministry to know how climbing has been implemented in other places. To show what's been done and to show that it's been a success. And so the specific locations that that will be highlighted are Halton Conservation, as climbing has been happening there for quite a long time, and they promote it and they think it's a great addition, as do I, to their services and activities, as well as Grey Sauble. Old Baldy is an example of a great success, I would say, in conservation efforts, and as well as in recreational access, as well as the Niagara Parks. Oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the name of the Glen over body, but the Glen basically, and the body.
Niagara Parks Commission.
Thank you, Mike. The Niagara Parks Commission and the success that the climbing has had down in the Glen, as well as some of the areas around Grimsby. So those are the ones that we are currently going to be focusing on. Yasser, one of our arguments for climbing is around its health and wellness promoting effects. It's jumping around. Might it make sense for us to gather a subcommittee of OAC members who are certified healthcare professionals? No doubt there are likely dozens more of us within the OAC membership. Said committee could advise, research, communicate as required in support of our cause. Yasser, I love the idea, and I assume that you're volunteering yourself to be on that committee and maybe even help organize. I think it's a great suggestion. Really, I do. I so far from who we've talked to, the health benefits are generally not the argument that needs bolstering. It's usually the one that is most readily accepted. But I don't think that means that it isn't worth beating the drum. The two primary concerns that usually almost always come up when we talk to any landowner or a stakeholder around climbing is obviously liability and conservation. And both of those have clear evidence and clear frameworks in place to have them be properly managed so that we can also continue to rock climb. So I have no concerns about those questions. I'm very happy to have those conversations, but yet we have not had really anybody challenge us on the health benefits aspect. That being said, I still think we can promote the health aspects and share it wide and loudly. I have no problem with that. Eva, thanks for calling in. I'll see you soon. If there are 52 gyms, not to mention guiding services, climbing shops, etc., there would be also a significant number of people employed in the climbing industry. Yes, 100% employment numbers also priority to conservatives. Absolutely, Eva. We've tried to take a stab at this. It's a pretty hard number to get. It would be great if we had that number, obviously. Even estimating just the number of climbers is difficult because of one, how big the community is and how broad you can cast that net. But I 100% agree. This is part of the argument that we're ideally making by sharing the fact that there are 52 gyms, by sharing all the different industries and companies that are impacted and related to climbing. I can't remember the numbers, but gyms need a certain number of membership to stay in business, right? And don't quote me on the numbers, but like basically a gym needs at least a few hundred or something members to stay in business. If you times that by 52 gyms, that's over 17,000 climbers. Like that's a lot of people. That gets attention. And so, if we are successful at mobilizing even a portion of those people to write letters, we'll get a response. And we'll show just by force that, if there's this many people in this sport and there's this many people talking about it, then it is an economic force in Ontario. Absolutely. Great point. I see there's some more questions. Jonathan Nunes, would it be a good time to begin raising money to help with this project? It's a great question, Jonathan. We've had this conversation back and forth quite a bit. The short and long answer is like, yes, money obviously always helps. Right now, given our current state, we are focusing on getting the attention of the decision makers, because if we had a lot of money right now, I honestly don't know how we would apply it immediately. Maybe we'd advertise more, or maybe we would, I don't know, pay the lobbyists instead of asking them to volunteer. But either way, we're still getting the information and the action we need. So I think it's a good point. I think we can get a lot done without necessarily raising the money. If there's a time that comes where we do need to raise a chunk of cash, we will definitely action towards that. Right now, it seems to make the most sense to put our attentions towards getting the attention of the provincial decision makers and getting them to sit down at the table with us, which funnily enough doesn't necessarily need money. It needs people. So that's what we're pleading for at this point in time. That may change. Janie, Devil's Glen and Rockwood climbing has proven to have very low incidences of injury given the number of years they have had climbing. Oh, absolutely. Janie, there's so much evidence out there that shows that climbing is a safe activity. It's actually unreal. We have, as part of the case studies we're sending to the ministry, we're having some of those conservation areas that we already work with comment on the safety of rock climbing. There is no doubt that that climbers as a user group are in general very safe compared to other outdoor recreational user groups in the province. So yes, absolutely, we are noting that. Tim, does Ontario Parks have statistics to show climbing is ability? I think it disappeared. They don't. No. So Ontario Parks is an operational body of the ministry. of the environment. And so the MOE, they do not track climbing at all. They've got a lot to deal with, obviously. Normally, this is not something that's on their radar. And that's why we need to get it on their radar. And so far, they've been receptive to that conversation. So we're looking forward to continuing it and pushing it forward and making sure that we keep it part of their conversation.
I think perhaps Tim's question was also, I know you didn't have a chance to read the whole thing, but it was essentially asking, do they have statistics to show that climbing is a liability for them, or is the speculation? And so we've addressed the liability portion of it, but just to address the ecological portion of it as well, Dustin did have a couple slides in the beginning, kind of sharing some of the most recent research around climbing. And we've shared some of that stuff out on our social media. So there really isn't evidence to support that climbing is detrimental. And much of the evidence that supported some of that in the past has been reconsidered. So this is an activity that can definitely be sustainable. And in fact, if we can push to have over 3,000 letters and lots of participation from the community, we can get to a point where we're working with Ontario Parks to build the resources that are necessary in the parks to make it as sustainable as possible.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. Yeah, sometimes the questions, I just kind of like jump around in my queue here. So if I miss anything, please type it again or let me know. Okay, so I've got a question. I got an answer from Ontario Parks about shutdown of DG. They told me that they shut down the park for climbing because there's too many routes being developed without their consultation. Would it be a good idea for the OAC announces to climbers stop drilling new routes in Ontario, saying it's no more bolting? So I think there's been a missed opportunity on the park side and on our side, on all stakeholders' side, to really have a management plan in place. Proper management plans result in compliance, and that's been shown time and time again in many, many different places. So my hope is that by working with the parks and the ministry, we can get management plans in place that ensure that whatever the park specifically is that the amount of development is appropriate and with consultation of the park. That would be the ideal. By legitimizing climbing in the parks and having the proper signage and communication between and engagement between the stakeholders and between the authority bodies like Ontario Parks and like the ministry, we educate people properly so that they know what they can and cannot do. And I think that that's the goal. That is 100% the goal. I know that doesn't necessarily answer that specific question, because I don't think that specific question is easily answered as a yes or no. I think that is a conversation that needs to happen with the ministry, with the parks, and understand what is right for each of the locations where climbing has already been happening for a very long time. And in some locations, if that means no more development, then great, that means no more development. In other areas, that might mean more developments. It's really up to the conversation that needs to happen between the parks and this community. Randy, I see you raised your hand.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Randy's going to say this, but I'm going to also jump in and say we have proposed a management plan as well. And so that's been sitting on a shelf for Devil's Glen specifically.
Thanks.
I think it's also just worth pointing out to everybody here that the current restrictions on climbing across the parks in Ontario essentially has funneled everyone into a very small selection of available climbing areas. So the argument that there's overdevelopment in these areas are essentially a result of that situation. If we had free and open access to climbing areas like in British Columbia, Alberta, Quebec, New Brunswick, none of it, I mean, we likely would not have the same situation that we're in right now. So I think it's a chicken and egg conversation, frankly.
I agree, Randy. I 100% agree. It's 100% chicken and the egg. But I think the egg, the next starting point, whatever like the start was, I think it's to have that climbing management plan in place. Like it's hard to know what is right or wrong if there's no thing that tells you what's right or wrong. So we, that's what we want to build. We want to collaborate with the parks to do that and with the ministry to do that. Aaron Murray asks, does our letter point to how other parks, national parks, manage climbing generally allowed? So Aaron, that's a great question. The letter itself won't, that is coming from the website. So when we post that letter, you'll get to read it. Like, obviously it'll be up there for everyone to read. If you feel uncomfortable with that letter, you don't have to send that one. You're more than welcome to send a letter of your own making. That being said, separately, as part of the case studies, we are sending frameworks that include other management plans as examples. That has been requested by the ministry because they want a foundation to start from. Obviously, they don't want to start from zero. And honestly, Aaron, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel here, right? Like, as we mentioned, there are many frameworks for conservation, for legal liability, for recreational opportunity. These exist, they're out there. I mean, the one thing about Ontario being so behind the times is they don't need to make this up, right? This is all out there. We just need to adapt it for our own province. Hopefully that answers your question. David, when approaching private landowners to discuss access concerns, especially liability, what is the OAC's response to liability concerns? Another advocacy group that I am involved with dedicates membership dollars to pay liability insurance. That's super interesting. Trail maintenance signage. This is a response to the earlier discussion of membership fees. David, thanks. Good point. So I'll say at first, it really depends on the landowner that we're referring to. There are different types of landowners out there. We have private landowners that we work with, like at the Turtle. We have conservation authorities that we work with, like at Halton. And of course, then we have a ministry that we work with, at the Swamp in Collapore, and the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. So each obviously with that, each landowner has its own level of liability risk acceptance, its own amount of resource and availability to designate towards managing the climbing, et cetera, as you can imagine. So I know that doesn't answer the question. Basically, when we work with a landowner, we try to find the solution that works best for them. And that might mean full frameworks. We have lawyers that volunteer with us. Unfortunately, I don't think any of them can make it tonight. But we do have lawyers that work with them to be able to make sure that we're finding the solution that works best for them. That may be a waiver that they provide that reduces their liability. That may be, on the back of your purchase ticket that says, by purchasing a pass to this park, you waive liability. That may be signage. We've definitely helped with signage at different properties before. There's a number of different options depending on that, the landowner. So the money for liability insurance, as well as trail maintenance and signage. So as I mentioned, we do trail maintenance, we do signage. We currently don't have any program in place where we are paying the liability insurance for another entity. I don't think that's off the table. I think that seems like an interesting tactic that, if we needed to, we could apply. But again, it would come down to what we would need to do for that individual landowner. I hope that answers your question sufficiently. Janie asks, is the tourism industry of Collingwood, Beaver Valley aware of the closure economic impact? I don't know, Janie. I'm not sure how what the tourism industry would involve there. I know so at least in the Beaver Valley, Collingwood area, I live here and very close to that area. This has been in the local media, so that includes like Mountain Life magazine, that includes Simcoe.com, that includes the Creemore Echo. Like some of the local things around here have mentioned DG and the closures. I don't know if they're awareness of the economic impact. Much like the province at large, climbing I don't think climbing is thought too much by the general person out there in the public. Now, I'd like to change that. I would love for people to know that climbing happens here. and that it's an important economic driver in communities. And I'm hoping that we can do that. I think some of the media coverage definitely helps. I know here in Kimberley, like the community knows about climbing in Baldy. I think climbers being a part of these communities, shopping in the restaurants, shopping in the shops, stopping by, being good stewards for the activity is critical. And so I think that's on all of us, to be honest. And I think we also need to continue to make sure that there's awareness around the economic impact of climbing. We are definitely telling the ministry about that, and we've shown you some of that argument today. So hopefully that helps answer the question a little bit. How much of Ontario Parks' reaction in DG can be contributed to or was influenced by the residents behind Devil's Glen Guardians? That is an interesting question. It's hard to say. I don't know. I can't quantify that. What I can say is that I think the reaction by the park was a tool that the park had. It was one action that they could have done. That I think a lot of the time, the park is just trying to manage as best as possible their property. They're not necessarily trying to cut people off from certain things. They're doing their best to conserve the environment in the way and the tools that they have. They have only good intentions in mind. I don't think the park even truly understands how much and DG means to this community. And I would say that I think they're learning that. I'd say that they're still open to talking to us, and that's positive. They want positive outcomes too. They want recreation and conservation, and they want economic benefits in their communities. Like, we have common goals here, and I think it's a matter of getting into these conversations, getting more nuanced, looking at other tools and tactics that we can use together to making sure that we're getting all of that benefit. So we need the parks to be our friends, so to say. We want the parks to be their friends. They are our friends. And I, for one, see a future where climbing is very much so a part of Ontario Parks and the Ministry of Environment. And the only way to do that is to work with them to get there. So I'll say that. The one more comment I'll add to that, anonymous attendee, on that comment, is that the parks, as an operator of the political entity that is the Ministry of the Environment, listens to the people. And so if we are a voice, they will respond. Graham joined late, so not sure if it was addressed. Cool, welcome, Graham. We're gonna have this video recorded, so you're welcome to check out other stuff that happened earlier. I will be sharing that. If we are launching an action plan with the ministry, or focusing on DG or all Ontario parks, there is potential for lots of additional climbing. Great question, Graham. Yes, we are focusing on all Ontario parks. We're looking for policy that covers the province. As I had a clip earlier on, which was kind of ruined because I forgot to move slides around. But this is a problem from Killarney to Devil's Glen, Sleeping Giant to Lion's Head. Like, this isn't a Southern Ontario thing. This isn't a Northern Ontario thing. This is an all of Ontario thing. And there is incredible climbing. I promise you, there's incredible climbing all across this province, And there's been climbing that's been happening here in this province for over 100 years. And not just in Southern Ontario, across the province, people have climbed for a long time on incredible rock. And, there's a lot of opportunity to reopen. It's not even open, it's reopen, because there was a time when people could climb here. And so I'll stop there. long story short, yes, entire province. Matt, can you ask the parks why they chose to zip in screws to secure their signs to live trees? I can ask. Sure, Matt. I haven't asked that. I can ask. I can ask that, but I think people are just trying to get their jobs done sometimes, and sometimes they don't think about everything that might have consequences. But like I said before, I really want to make sure that we're going to work with them to get a climate management plan in place. So I don't hold it against them, but we're hopefully going to work together to try to get some good things done for climbing. Hope that answers your question. Okay. There are no more questions in the queue. I have not been paying attention to the other chat. So if there's been questions in the general chat, feel free to move over to the Q&A, or if the panelists saw anything that I might have missed, I'm happy to try to address that. No more questions.
I do have a comment, Dustin, and I think you've already kind of covered the sentiment here, but just I guess first thing, let's all try to do our best to engage everybody, as you've already mentioned, to participate in the letter writing campaign. The more the merrier, and the more that we put our own personal thoughts and feelings into those letters, I think the better. But if you don't know where to start, we've come up with a template, and that should at least get the juices flowing. The second thing is, let's keep it positive. Let's envision a future where we're working together, as Dustin has outlined for us so eloquently, and let's keep it positive so that they know that we're willing to really lean into that future and to make it happen. So I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks. And yeah, really appreciate everyone calling in tonight and listening to me ramble on. So I think hopefully, if you're going to take away any messages from this, like we're bigger and stronger as a community together, and we can definitely get a more positive outcome for Ontario climbing in the future by working with the ministry on this. So again, I thank you. We please do pay attention to our social media. We'll announce when that widget on that site, climbinparks.ca, when that widget is ready to go. We just got a couple more things to tweak out. We're trying to get it done, but it's tough. It takes a little bit of time. So we appreciate your patience there. And then please, like, keep this going all summer long. This is not a once and done thing. And we're going to make sure to remind folks and get out to the gyms and talk to your friends, your family, talk to anyone who will care to listen.
If there's anything that we haven't mentioned in terms of opportunities for amplifying our message, please feel free to reach out to us directly, either through social media or send us an email at info@Ontario Climbers, allianceofclimbers.ca. So yeah, let's kick it off. Let's all do our own personal letters. And then again, if there's any opportunities to link in gyms, we will be working in the background to do that. But any other things that we may not have thought about to amplify our message and make sure that we blow that 3,000 mark out of the water, let's do it.
Yep. And if you sign up at that climbinparks.ca, I'm collecting your email addresses, and you'll be the first to know when we're ready to get that going.
Thanks, Pat. Great. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful night.